Hi Year 10 and welcome back to another YouTube video for your spoken language GCSE. So today we are going to work on conclusions, our title Clear Conclusions. Our objective, we are learning to write clear and powerful conclusions. And hopefully by the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand why conclusions are needed, explore what a good conclusion looks like, and then write your own conclusion and hopefully self-assess. So the key words today, there's only a few. We've got structure, conclusion, and forest, which isn't actually a word, it's an acronym. So I've got structure because we're focusing on conclusion. It's really important because it finalizes the overall structure of your speech. So it's important. We have the word conclusion, and I'm going to go through the word conclusion on the next slide. And we have the acronym forest because hopefully we've been using forest techniques throughout our entire speech. And what we don't want to do is think, right, I've got a conclusion, it's going to be short, I don't need to worry about forest. Yes, you do, because your conclusion will sound so much better if it uses some of those techniques. So just to quickly go over forest, we've got direct address, which will be fantastic in the conclusion actually, anecdote, facts, opinions, rhetorical question, emotive language, statistics, and triplets. See if you can fit any of those into your conclusion, because it will make it a much more powerful ending to your speech. So we're going to go through the PowerPoint slide. On some of the slides, you'll come across this symbol. Right, let's get it. Yeah, so it's a pause symbol. So pause the video, have a think of what the task is that I've set you, and then play it to find out what the answers are and what you need to do next. So your first task is thinking about the word conclusion and the purpose of a conclusion. I want you to have a read through these statements. There are 6. And think about which you feel are true for conclusions and which you may think are false. Okay, so I'm not going to read the statements out at this point. I'm going to do it in a moment. I want you to have a look at the statements and think about what is the purpose of a conclusion, and is that statement true or is it false? So pause the video here, have a read through. It shouldn't take you too long. Please don't skip this, because it's really important that you know the purpose of a conclusion so that you can then write an effective conclusion. So pause it here, read through it, think about the answers, and replay me in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go through this. In the conclusion, we should only list all the points we have already talked about. So do you think that's true or false, listing the points you've already mentioned in paragraph 2, 3, 4, and 5? False. Okay, we may make some of those points, but we shouldn't only list them, because then we're repeating ourselves. And the conclusion isn't about repeating ourselves. Second one, in the conclusion, it is important that we make a new point. That's a really interesting one. It's false, okay? We do not want to make any new points, because that's not the purpose of a conclusion. If you want to make another point, you add another paragraph before the conclusion, but do not add something completely new in your conclusion. In the conclusion, it is good practice to refer back to the main question. So think about what you've done for literature over the last year or so, and think about that reference back to the question. Do you think that's what you need to do in the conclusion? Yes. Okay, so it's really good practice to actually reference the question in that first sentence. In the conclusion, it is best to start with phrases like in conclusion or in summary. across there, okay? Because even though some people may do that, it's not necessarily the best way to start. So this is where you want to actually use those Daft Forest techniques. Start off with a rhetorical question. Put in emotive language rather than in conclusion or in summary. If you struggle, yes, put it in because it's a good start. But then once you've written the conclusion, go back and see if you can edit that first sentence and change it and take that conclusion or summary out. The next one, in the conclusion, we summarize the main ideas for the reader. Yes, we do that. So your main ideas will be those points, but we're not listing them. We are summarizing them. Okay? In the conclusion, we should make a powerful statement that leaves the reader wanting a change also. So, true. Okay? Those powerful statements will leave the reader feeling this urge to do something about what you have written about. Okay? And if they finish reading and if they contemplate and ponder and think about what you have written about, then you have done a good job. And in this spoken language, remember, you will have an audience, and that audience at the end needs to take into account everything that you have said, and that conclusion will just really make it powerful. Right, moving on. Hopefully that's helped to sort of understand what the purpose of a conclusion is. And if you're stuck a little bit later on when you come to write your conclusion, do come back and have a look at this slide. Okay, so just bringing in a little bit more information. What is a conclusion? The conclusion is the final paragraph of an essay. Yeah, I think that's quite straightforward. And its purpose is to bring the essay to a finish. So if you have a look at the image of the burger, that's pretty much your speech or any essay that you write. You start off with the top bun, which is the introduction, and all the filling of that burger are your points, are your paragraph. It just makes that burger juicier, just like it makes your speech engaging. And the final bottom bun of the burger is the conclusion. Just remember that without, let's say, the conclusion, that bottom bun, that burger is incomplete. So your entire speech is incomplete. It will almost finish on that third or fourth paragraph, and then the reader will almost be left wanting more and you're unable to give it. So that conclusion is really, really important. So what should your conclusion look like? So you need to explain what people need to do in order to end your type of discrimination. Think about what parents, schools, the government and individuals need to do or change or think about. So if you are talking about racism, think about how can we, maybe as an individual, as a society, as a community, how can we or what can we do, small or big, that will make an impact in moving towards change. Also, encourage people to act now and explain what they must do. So that bit there at the end, explain what they must do. It doesn't have to be another paragraph long. Conclusions do not have to be as long as your paragraph 2, 3, 4, and 5. But that explanation could be short, it could be brief, it could be your powerful statement, just to give them an indication of what you want them to do. And the final bit is end with a powerful statement. So they could sort of go hand in hand or they could be separate. So I have 2 model examples of a conclusion. If you have a look, they're not long. They're not as long as the paragraphs in the middle because we want to get to the point where we're ending our speech and what information we have at the end is powerful. What I've done, because I found it difficult to write a conclusion without having paragraphs 1, 2, 3, and 4 in front of me, I went back to Miss Robinson's PowerPoint on introductions, and I took one of the model introductions from Miss Robinson's PowerPoint, and I have written a conclusion based on that. Okay, so I'm just going to read it through. So picture the scene. A young woman walks down the street and is at peace. No catcalls, no wolf whistles, no lewd comments. Unfortunately, sexism is still such a serious issue that this scene is only a fantasy for the majority of women. This needs to change. So that was the introduction. We are going to read the conclusion on the left and have a think about what's good and what we might think is just not as engaging. So in conclusion, sexism is still evident in today's society. As mentioned before, sexism impacts people and their daily life. Imagine being looked at in your workplace as just a piece of meat. How would that make you feel? We need to stand up against sexism. Okay, so if you look at the first in conclusion, we did say it's possibly not the best way to start, but if you are struggling, do start it off and then maybe change it, because we can actually take away in conclusion and just start off with sexism is still evident in today's society. I feel like in this conclusion, we've just got sentences. As mentioned before, sexism impacts people. Imagine being looked at in like that imagine sentence. Hopefully that's something that you've written earlier on, and it just feels like it's something that needs to be developed upon, and it's not in the right place. It shouldn't be in the conclusion. We need to stand up against sexism, yes, but I feel that conclusion doesn't really tell you what you need to do to stop sexism. It's just quite repetitive of things that you may write within your paragraphs. The next one, can we change fantasy into reality? With the help of everybody around us, we can. Like a revolution, working together towards a common goal is always the beginning of change. Let us not stereotype genders. Let us treat everyone in an equal way and let our minds broaden. After all, we are in the 21st century where anything is possible. So have a think about which one you feel is slightly more effective or a lot more effective. Which one do you think? Have a pause, have a read through them again. I sort of mentioned the positives and the negatives of that first one. What do you think about the second one? Okay, so which is more effective and why? So you should have identified the second example is a lot more effective than the first one. Let's think about the reasons why it is effective. So that first statement, it doesn't start off with in conclusion. It actually starts off with a Daforis technique, a rhetorical question. Can we change fantasy into reality? So why do you think I've come up with that sentence? It's a sentence that is used, or there are words in that sentence that is used in the introduction. So Miss Robinson wrote, unfortunately, sexism is still such a serious issue that the scene is only a fantasy for the majority of women. So I wanted to reference that because it shows that there's a link between the introduction and the conclusion. So can we change fantasy into reality? Okay, so a lovely rhetorical question there, and it links back to the introduction. With the help of everybody around us, we can. Like a revolution, working together towards a common goal is always the beginning of change. So think about that sentence. It's all about change, because even though our entire speech has been on sexism and this form of discrimination, well, we don't want to continue that form of discrimination. We want there to be a change, which is what I've written. Let us not stereotype genders. Let us treat everyone in an equal way and let our minds broaden by educating ourselves. So what I've got there is going back to what you must do in your introduction. what people need to do in order to end sexism. So this idea of stereotyping, if we stop stereotyping genders, then we are moving away from sexism. Education, educating ourselves and not being narrow-minded is moving away from discriminating people. So it's short, it's only one sentence, but can you see the DeForest technique used again? So let us, and let our. So you've got the almost like the triplet and the repetition and the anaphora within that sentence. After all, we are in the 21st century where anything is possible. And I felt that that was quite a powerful statement, because we always feel that the century we're in now, the time period we're in now, we are the most modernized. So if we are unable to change it now, then what hope is there for change at all? So that 21st century where anything is possible, and I feel that's quite a powerful statement to finish with, because it'll get your readers to contemplate, actually, if we don't do it now, when else are we going to do it? Because we have changed so much over the years. So I hope that's been a little bit helpful. Look at the amount that I've written, not much at all, but every sentence I've written has been really, really thought about, and there's been links back to the introduction and hopefully the sections, the key almost filling in the middle. So what now? What I'd like you to do is read through your speech from the introduction to paragraph 5. Use the previous slides to help you write your conclusion. It doesn't need to be long. So we've got a few sentence starters here, and if you look at those sentence starters, they're not dull, they're not boring. They include DeForest techniques, and it's worth magpieing, picking some of those out and trying to use them in your writing. And once you've done that, it's really important that you self-assess. So read through your speech and check, does your work make sense? Okay, so make sure you're not repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Does it make sense? Are you able to portray your thoughts and ideas to the audience? Spell check it and watch out for things spell checkers don't pick up. Okay, so usually if you're typing it out, you'll have squiggly lines. Those are there for a reason. Please do double check. Have you written in paragraphs? You should have, because when we are setting homework, we are sort of specifically referring to paragraphs at a time. So each of those are a paragraph. Punctuation is really, really important. Exclamation marks, question marks if you're asking a question, exclamation marks if you are putting across something that is exciting or shocking or surprising. Those punctuations are important for when you come to read or perform your speeches. And then once you've done that, why not read your speech to a family member? Read it to your mum, your dad, your siblings. See what feedback they have. The more practice you have delivering your speech, the better it will be for when you get back to school. Right, so finally, coming up next week, on Wednesday, 20th May, Miss Mitchell-Brady will be delivering a PowerPoint on effective presentation techniques and note-making. And Friday, 22nd May is your final deadline. Your full speech must be submitted to your teacher for marking. Okay, so that is your final deadline. I would recommend if you follow what the times that we've given you and you do complete the conclusion today, do email it to your teacher. I'm sure they'll be happy to read through what you've written or the whole thing before you submit that final one on the 22nd of May. Okay, so thank you for listening. I hope it's been useful. I hope you're all staying safe, completing the work, because you know this is the beginning of your next GCSE and we want to start off as we mean to go on. Thank you. So this is Miss Mahmud, and have a lovely day.